There are moments in farming when you realize you've been working harder, not smarter, and it feels almost embarrassing. Every grower has been there. You spend years turning piles, hauling manure, layering compost, and still the soil seems tired. It dries out too fast, crusts over after rain, or never quite springs to life the way the textbooks promise. Then you stumble across a method so simple, so old and so effective that it forces you to rethink the entire hierarchy of soil amendments. This mulch trick does exactly that. Farmers who've tested it often end up feeling the same mix of shock and frustration. Shock because of how dramatically it transforms the soil, and frustration because it worked better than the compost they spent half a season babying. Today, I want to break down this overlooked technique, one that blends history, soil science, and practical field results, so you can use it immediately and see the same dramatic improvements. The core of this method lies in using raw organic matter as a living mulch rather than decomposed compost. Most growers have been trained to believe compost is the peak of soil improvement. The thinking is understandable. Compost is stable, nutrient-rich and safe for roots, but its very stability is also its limitation. Once organic matter reaches the compost stage, most of the volatile compounds, bioactive molecules, and microbial energy have already been released. Compost is incredibly useful, but it doesn't create dramatic change quickly. The mulch trick that outperforms compost relies on using raw, undecomposed material right at the soil surface, what some agronomists now call fresh organic layering. This method, you know, wakes up the soil biology in a way compost simply cannot, because it gives microorganisms the one thing compost lacks: a continuous food source they can decompose directly in place. When I first tried this approach, I laid down a thick layer of green cuttings. Fresh leaves, weeds without seed heads, and thin, chopped branches, straight onto a struggling plot. Within weeks, the soil had shifted from hard and compacted to soft and friable. Earthworms that had been nearly absent before suddenly populated the layer beneath. When I pulled the mulch back, I found tunnels, castings, and visible signs of microbial activity. Compost had never achieved this speed or intensity on the same land. This method works because decomposition happens directly in the soil ecosystem. Traditional composting happens outside the soil. You're essentially pre-digesting material in a pile, then spreading the remains later. With the fresh mulch trick, decomposition happens exactly where plants need it most. At the soil interface where microbes, fungi and roots coexist. When raw organic matter begins to break down in place, it releases sugars, organic acids and compounds that stimulate fungal hyphae. These hyphae are key players in soil aggregation. They knit particles together, improve structure and allow water infiltration to dramatically increase. This is precisely why farmers who apply this technique often notice their soil becomes more sponge-like within a single season. There is another advantage compost cannot match. Raw mulch protects the soil from sun and wind while feeding the organisms below it. This combination means moisture remains stable. Temperatures remain moderate, and biological activity can run continuously instead of stopping during dry spells. Compost, even when it's spread thickly, does not provide the same top protection because it dries out quickly, forming a sort of crust that limits airflow. Applying this technique correctly, well, it requires understanding how thick and how fresh the material should be. On a home garden scale, fresh mulch can be laid down in layers of about 10 to 15 centimeters, depending on the material. Softer greens, break down faster and may need periodic replenishment. Woodier materials take longer, but they provide long-term benefits and really should be balanced with soft, nitrogen-rich materials. On a larger farm scale, using crop residues is honestly the most efficient application. After harvest, instead of clearing the field or burning residues, just cut stalks short and crumble them into a surface layer. You can follow up by adding green plant mass if it's available. Over time, even the coarsest residue becomes part of a dark, rich soil horizon. One farmer in East Africa tested this method by laying fresh banana leaves, comfrey cuttings and grass clippings around his cassava rows. He repeated this every 4 weeks. In just a few months, the soil was so soft that he could push a hand trowel deep without resistance. In contrast, his control plot with compost alone remained noticeably firmer. Another grower, working with tomato tunnels, used fresh mulch to suppress nematodes. By feeding surface-dwelling microbes aggressively, he changed the soil biology enough to reduce pest pressure without chemicals. What makes this more powerful than compost is how it transforms soil behavior over time. Soil with fresh mulch begins to develop fungal dominance, something compost struggles to stimulate unless mixed with woody particles. Many crops, fruit trees, maize, tomatoes, peppers, prefer fungal-leaning soil. The mulch method naturally shifts the biological balance. The surface protection also prevents erosion, especially during heavy rain, and improves infiltration so water soaks in rather than running off. Over months, this creates a deeper, darker topsoil layer that continues to regenerate itself as long as fresh material is added. The most important part to understand is that you are not feeding the plant directly. You are feeding the soil system that feeds the plant. Compost often tries to shortcut this by providing ready-made nutrients. The mulch trick forces the soil organisms to do the work. That labour creates a dynamic, living system with better nutrient cycling, better structure and better resilience during drought. If this guide gave you a new way to boost your soil health and outpace compost without extra cost or equipment, then make sure to subscribe to Farm Logic, share this resource with other growers, and help keep practical, field-tested knowledge alive.